Welcome to Surviving Documentation. Why do I need to do it? Today we're going to cover why you need to use documentation when you write academic papers or research papers. Specifically, we're going to talk about APA or American Psychological Association formatting for those papers. But before we talk about references and citations, before we talk about quotations and documentation and how to do it, we need to first of all cover why do you need to. Because sometimes using APA or MLA or any of the alphabet formatting uh, types can be sometimes challenging for students. And so um, today we're going to cover for a few minutes why you need to document, why you need to use APA in your research papers. So why do you need to document? The principal reason why you need to document is that words and ideas belong to people. They are property. They are property like a painting is property, like a song is somebody's property when they write it and create it and sing it. Um, like um, um, a car is somebody's property. Words and ideas belong to people because they are created by people. And when people create or build something, like this television set, it's their property. And if you take their creative effort, it is just like stealing this television. It is the exact same thing because words and ideas that are written in papers and journals and books and every other type of literature ha- are the result of a creative effort of somebody. Now, I know you're not like that. You don't want to take anything that's not yours. So with this presentation is going to help prevent you from stealing or committing plagiarism and help you to use the information that you get from others in the appropriate way so that you're on the right side of things instead of on the wrong side of things. You'll notice that this is so important that in this first slide, I made sure to give a credit to the creator of this photo of a television, even though I'm just doing a presentation, and this is not going to be published anywhere else except for Ivy Tech students. So understanding the importance of this, I gave the credit to this um, photographer and to this website because that was the right thing to do because this photo, this image is their property, and this is what they asked me to do. So the next question is, okay, how can I use it correctly? You can borrow words, sentences, and ideas for your papers as long as you let the reader know who their owners are. So you can borrow ideas. In the academic world, we produce ideas for others to read and share as long as people recognize that those ideas and words and sentences and frameworks belong to somebody. As long as we borrow, and that's the key word, borrow instead of steal, then the fair use of words and sentences and phrases are there for us all to be able to build better papers and better research and do our work. But the key word is borrow. And it's important to think of borrowing like borrowing a library book. A library book belongs to somebody else. It's paid for. It's the property of someone else. It's been put in a specific building and made available by somebody else, but you're free to use it as long as you use it the correct way, as long as you return it when you're supposed to, and as long as you don't damage the book or in any way misuse or abuse the book, then you're free to borrow and to read and to use for your benefit. And documentation in the academic world is the same way. As long as you use somebody else's ideas and words and sentences properly, then you can borrow them for your own work to build your own research papers to support your own theses, your own ideas that you want to support in your paper. So how do you let people know that you're borrowing, right? You're not like that person who would take or steal. You're like the person who says, I want to do this correctly. I don't want to take anybody's work. I want to do it the right way. And the way that you do that are through two tools. The first one is called citations. The second one is called references. And citations are those things that show what you borrowed in the paper. So if you write a sentence that's based on somebody else's work, you put a citation immediately after that sentence. If you write a paragraph that's based on somebody else's work, you put a citation immediately after that paragraph to say, hey, this is borrowed, and this is who I borrowed it from. Now, I'm going to take you to a particularly well-cited paragraph from an article about community college students, about first-time community college students. And you'll notice in this paragraph that was written by somebody else that all of the words in the colors, in the orange and the green, are citations. This is where they've indicated, hey, I wrote this paragraph, but I based it on the work of others. Now, you'll notice that there are lots of citations in this paragraph because this person has done lots of research, and they want the reader to know, hey, I borrowed lots of ideas. They also want the reader to know, hey, I've done a lot of research. And by putting all of these names and all of these articles in here, I'm showing you that I have done my due diligence. I have done the necessary research to become well informed on this idea, and I demonstrate that by giving you the citations and the references to prove it. Now, the first sentence that starts with one of the most important challenges for community college is to meet the needs of a very diverse community of people, including traditional and non-traditional students. Now, the authors, Inman and Mays, of this article want us to know that that first orange set of words, Cross 1990, they built that first sentence off of an article written by somebody named Cross and published in 1990. This tells us that they borrowed this idea, that they based their sentence on somebody else's research, and they brought that research to us. Now, this is called a citation. This happens in the text. But a citation alone isn't enough because Cross 1990 doesn't tell us enough. What it's actually meant to do is it's actually meant to lead us to a reference. And a reference is one of those things at the end of the paper that has the full information that tells us where you got the information that you were citing. So in the paper, you cite the last name and the year, generally, and then that leads us to a reference page at the very end, or a list of resources, where we have, again, PK Cross 1990, but the complete title of the article and where that article can be found in the ERIC Document Reproduction Service. And what this does for us is it allows us to have a shorthand in the paper called the citation that we can document every place we borrowed somebody's idea, but you don't have to write out the complete reference in every place that you use their ideas. You can just use the last name and the year, and then the reader's going to come to the reference page and look for an article written by Cross, written in 1990. And again, the same thing is true, again, with this reference of Daugherty and Willett and Willay. And again, Daugherty leads us back to KJ's article written in 1994, and actually this is a book. And you take a look at that and you see that you can tie the citations in the paper to the references at the end. That tells me that this sentence that starts one group of particular importance was written based on the work of Daugherty. And so references and citations give us the ability to say to people, I borrowed this idea, I borrowed these words, I borrowed this sentence, I borrowed this paragraph, and this is where I borrowed it from. That's the credit that authors need to get for their work. That's like paying money for a TV. That's like paying admission to a movie. Creating a citation and a reference is the entrance fee, is the way that we say, hey, I borrowed this legally, I borrowed this under fair use. Now, as we take a look at this, what do I need to document? When do I need to use a citation and reference package for something? Anytime you use someone's words, you must put a citation connected to those words and a reference. Every time you use someone's words. If you use somebody's words in the first paragraph and that same person's word in the fourth paragraph, you've got to put citations in both places. And even if you only use 3 or 4 words, And there are rules, which we'll cover in a later session, when you don't have to cite. But the general rule is that if you use 3 or more of somebody else's words in a row, you've got to create a citation and a reference for that to let somebody know that you're borrowing from somebody else. Anytime you use someone's ideas, every time you use someone's ideas, even if you only use the fragments of those ideas, you must create a citation and a reference connected to that citation. Even if you put it in your own words. Even if you put it into your own words, you must create a citation and a reference, because even though you may be using your own words, you're using somebody else's ideas to build that sentence. If you read an article, if you read a journal, if you read a book, if you read a chapter, if you read a website, and you learn something that you did not know before after reading that source, and you use that knowledge in your paper in any way, you've got to create a citation and a reference to say, hey, I learned this here, and I'm using that idea, that information, this fact in my paper, even if you put it into your own words. Anytime you use someone else's creation, every time you use someone's creation, even if you only use a piece of their creation, this includes artwork and music and literature and interviews and TV shows and movies. You have to create a citation to bring those things into your paper. Technically, you even need to do that for lecture notes and the textbook when you use those pieces in your papers. When in doubt, document. That's the key phrase. If you use an extra citation or two in your paper, that's a very minor thing. But if you miss a citation and you miss a reference where you should have said, hey, I'm borrowing this, but you didn't, it becomes stealing or plagiarism because you didn't pay for it. You didn't give the author credit. You didn't abide by the rules. And so an extra citation might get you a minor note from an instructor or professor. Plagiarism can get you a 0 in the paper, a 0 in the class. It can get you suspended from Ivy Tech Community College. Plagiarism is a big deal because it's seen as stealing. So when in doubt, document. If you have too many, then somebody can come back and ask you to edit a paper. But having more than enough or having enough is essential when you do academic research. There are 2 additional sessions. Session 2 is on how to know how to build references, when to reference, where you put the reference, all those little issues and how to do that successfully. Session 3 is on citations. When do you cite? How do you cite? How do you cite when you're using direct quotations? And how do you cite when you put it into your own words? And how do you cite it when you use, 5 different articles to construct a sentence or a paragraph? So we're going to cover that in Session 3. So 2 and 3 will give you the details on references and citations built upon this session, which tells you that you need to document because you need to show that you're legally borrowing somebody else's property. I believe you can do it. I know that sometimes documentation can be complex. I know that sometimes it can be difficult. But I know that you, as a successful student, can work your way through this given enough time and effort. There's additional resources online at Purdue OWL, and if you go to Google and just type in Purdue OWL, it's usually the first website that pops up, and it's the Purdue Online Writing Lab, and it has a lot more information about APA, about MLA, and again, the direct address is owl.english.purdue.edu. I hope that this presentation has been beneficial to you. I encourage you to pick up Session 2 and Session 3 to complete your introduction to documentation.